Thank you, Refuge family, Refuge friends. It is an incredible honor to welcome you all to the 50th anniversary celebration of Don Edwards San Francisco Bay National Wildlife Refuge. Yeah. Woo! If I haven't had the opportunity to meet you personally yet, my name is Matt Brown. I'm the complex manager for the San Francisco Bay National Wildlife Refuge Complex. That's 7 refuges spread out from the North Bay up Antioch, out to the Farallon Islands, all the way down to Salinas River National Wildlife Refuge on Monterey Bay. And it's this incredible diversity of ecosystems that are surrounded by these incredible diverse communities. And they exist, and we are all here because 50 years ago, people had a vision and were willing to fight for a vision of a better future. And that is part of what we are going to celebrate today. And in a little bit, we're going to hear from one of those original visionaries who helped get us here today, 50 years later. But first, it is important to recognize that Don Edwards San Francisco Bay National Wildlife Refuge spans the traditional ancestral home of the Ohlone people, who have lived and cared for this land for thousands of years. So I'd like to introduce Desiree Munoz, who represents the Ohlone from the Costanoan Rumsel Carmel tribe. And she's a facilitator of past and present Ohlone knowledge, focused on youth engagement, land use, cultural knowledge sharing, and community collaboration with relation to social justice. So please join me in welcoming Desiree, who will be sharing a land acknowledgement with us through song.
So Mrs. Duke, Ka Inkarak Desiree, Kaha Masis Amane, Kaha Costanoan Rumsen Carmel tribe, Kaha Rumsen Ohlone. So good morning, everyone. My name is Desiree. I am very happy to be here. I am a member of the Costanoan Rumsen Carmel tribe, and I speak Rumsen Ohlone. You're going to be hearing some Rumsen Ohlone songs. And just to talk about a little bit about this area, Ohlone is the inhabited people of this area that have been here for hundreds and thousands of years. Our people were caretakers of this land, and we continue to thrive here today. I wanted you all to get a little bit of a aerial view of Ohlone territory, and it actually starts at the Golden Gate Bridge. Have you all been to the Golden Gate Bridge? You can raise your hand, right? It's a beautiful place. I used to work there at Goga. And it spans all the way down to Big Sur. Have you all been to Big Sur? Right? Very beautiful area. And then all of East Bay, so we're talking about Berkeley, all throughout the Salinas valleys. And where Rumsen people come from is actually, I say the beautiful territory is Monterey, California. In the Carmel Valley area is where my people thrive today. And that's where we're coming from today. And my partner here, who's with me, Cedric Hettinger, he is Chochenyo speaking Ohlone. Can y'all say Chochenyo? Chochenyo. That is a language that was heard here for hundreds and thousands of years and still continues to be a thriving voice here today with his cousin Vincent, who has a Ohlone Cafe, and my cousin Louis. So we have a very deep-rooted area and a very deep-rooted knowledge that's here in this area, but I know that everybody likes to have the romanticized version of Ohlone, and so now I'm going to sing you a few songs. The song that I actually sang when I came in here is to open up the spirit world and invite all those good spirits of our ancestors to come in and welcome you all for the celebration you all are having, this 50th year of you all being caretakers now to this land. And it's important to acknowledge that you are the caretakers of this land now because you all have your hands in the soil and the roots, and you are taking care of this place, and it looks really, very, very beautiful. So thank you. I want to say shururu. Can you all say shururu? That means thank you so much. So now I'm going to actually sing Ishman. Can you all say Ishman? Ishman is the sun. We want to make sure Carl is just coming in to cool things off, but we want to bring Ishman in to brighten up y'all's day because today is going to be a beautiful day. So with that, I'm going to sing To the Morning Sun. Ishmanitu, 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 Ishamanitu, Ishamanitu, Ishmanitu, 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 Ishmanitu. Oh. So in our way, we don't clap. And I did hear one of my relatives in the back say, oh, and that is the best thing that I want to hear, because we want to show gratitude. We want to show that you're feeling it, that you like my beautiful voice as I'm singing up here, but also in that deep part of your stomach where it actually feels good, and you get that warm feeling in your stomach where it feels good, and in your heart where it feels even warmer and feels great about it. You're feeling that heartbeat of my clapper stick. But even to your ears, that it sounds good, we want to go down to that deep part in your stomach and let out a big oh of appreciation. So can you all do that for me? Right? Yeah, I like it already. Y'all are practicing. So to get you all on the same rhythm of the beat, I'm going to count to 3 in my language, and I'll point my fingers so y'all can keep up. And on the count of 3, you are going to let out a big oh of appreciation. So, Imala, Utis, Kapes. Y'all, I want my ancestors to hear me all the way down. I want your ancestors to hear me. I know we could do better than that. We're celebrating 50 years here. I want to get you all pumped up, all right? So one more time. Imala, Utis, Kapes. All right.
So today, as you came in, you may have noticed the sign for La Riviere Marsh as you drove in. And there's a self-guided endangered species game that's actually going to be taking place there today. So I encourage you to walk into that marsh. And that marsh is named for Florence and Philip La Riviere in recognition of their decades of environmental advocacy to protect the natural world. And it was in 1965 that Florence responded to an invitation in the newspaper from Santa Clara County planner Art Ogilvie. And the invitation read, "If you're worried about what's happening to the shores of the San Francisco Bay, come to my office in the morning at 10 o'clock. And Florence showed up that morning at 10 o'clock, and she has been showing up ever since to defend the bay, to push for the creation, expansion, and protection of Don Edwards San Francisco Bay National Wildlife Refuge. And we are so fortunate to have Florence here today to share a few thoughts with us. So Florence?
There are only 3 of us that I know still around from those days, and Howard Shellhammer is one of them. But Howard is famous in my group because for one thing, oh, sorry.
It's okay. Here, you want to hold it? Or you want me to hold
okay.
it? There we go.
He represents, is that better or worse? He represents a group of people that were so helpful to all of us in those days when we were struggling along, trying to decide how we were going to bring this to fruition. He represents, for me today, the San Jose State University staff. Those guys turned out night after night at city councils describing why these lands were important. And also during that period, he got together the scientific documentation, which was very difficult even then, to get the Department of the Interior to name our charming little mouse endangered. And his efforts to this day have helped acre after acre to be kept from development. Howard, did everyone see you? The only other person I know from those days is Nancy Holmes, who wouldn't go with me down to the office that day. She said she was sick, so I had to go. But she is now she couldn't be here today because at age 87, she's had too many projects this weekend involving a wetland preservation project she has in Seaside, Oregon. she also is planning, the only one I know, that small city, next February 2nd. She wanted me to tell everybody is Wetlands Day, February 2nd next year. She's working on it already. When I was driving over here today from across the bay where I live, I realized that driving around the bay right now, so many places, you can see the efforts of this group have come, the early group and the one currently in operation have come to fruition. If you drive along in Redwood City, you look at Bear Island, which was now it's about 3,000 acres. At one time, barren, lifeless plants there, and now is a flourishing, beginning tidal marsh that is as delightful as any that was here originally. Mr. Ogilvy's idea was that we could get, this is what he announced that day in his office, that we would be able to save our wetlands by having the federal government declare that this was a national wildlife refuge and to start obtaining land there. So that was the beginning of all that effort. But most important along the way, we realized that since this was going to be a congressional action to establish this urban refuge, we would have to have a champion in Congress. We knew that Don Edwards was our man in San Jose, and we knew that he was extremely interested in peace projects and in civil rights. So we didn't know that he had any view of environmental protection, but those interests that he did have seemed pretty good ones to us. So when we went to him, he said, sounds like a good idea. So we went from door to door to, as I say, to city councils, and mostly we got fairly decent responses. Yes, we'd like to see our shores of the bay in our community protected. But one that I always remembered, and I think there were some profound statements from him, the mayor of Atherton, and he said, you guys are carpetbaggers. I don't really know why you're here, which was pretty defeating. But when we got up to leave at the end of the meeting, hours later, he said, "Thank you all for coming. This is democracy in action." Pretty. And I think that's a good saying to remember. It is democracy in action. But Mr. Edwards was far more than an originator of the legislation. He was also on his devotion to this refuge was evident. One of the early managers, Rick Coleman, told me that he would go to his office or call him, and Mr. Edwards was always ready. He was always accessible and agreeable to helping, often with that most important issue, funding. If you join a wetlands group, they are the finest, kindest, most helpful, most agreeable people that you will ever meet anyone. They care for each other. We are not through. There are hundreds of acres in Redwood City still to be acquired, hundreds more in Newark, and as the years go by, you all have to stick with it because there are several hundred more there that are going to come up. Wait, first I wanted to give a shout out to some of the people I've already mentioned. Mr. Edwards, of course, Arthur Ogilvy, whose office I went to that day, to the people from the press who have supported the beauties of the bay and their value to us human beings as well as to the critters we share that part of the earth with. One time Mr. Edwards said, "Oh, I have to have a public hearing on this before I go any further with it." And so what we knew we had to have a good show out there, because the people that were opposed to having a refuge here were going to be there en masse. So all the local environmental groups got together and we bought the most bilious colored stock we could find and send these large postcards everywhere. We put dark printing, all kinds of asterisks and comments hoping that we would get lots of attention to it. And one on the front, I think it says, "If you do one thing for wetlands this year, come to this meeting." And we had 400 people there. It was just a glorious day. So please don't anybody forget that the battle is waging on. I don't care how many defeats you have to come back and keep at it, because you will be rewarded as time goes by and the people realize what a beautiful asset they have in the lovely shorebirds, ducks, geese, and even the little plants. Thank you all. Thank you all so much. Thank you for coming out. Isn't it wonderful to have something to celebrate when there's so much to weep over these days? So let us enjoy today. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, honey.
So we have one more speaker today. I want to introduce Paul Souza. Paul Souza is the Regional Director for the Fish and Wildlife Service and is responsible for overseeing our agency's operations in California, Nevada, and the Klamath Basin. Paul leads over 900 employees who work together with others to conserve, protect, and enhance fish, wildlife, and plants and their habitats for the continuing benefit of the American people. Paul actually grew up along the shores of San Francisco Bay, and it is a treat for us to be able to welcome him back home for, as Lauren said, having a celebration. It's so nice to have something to celebrate. So, Paul?
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Should I say, oh! It's truly a joy for me to have the chance to be with you today to celebrate Don Edwards San Francisco Bay National Wildlife Refuge. I am a native son, born and raised in Alameda, born in 1972. I think that was a good year. Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday to the Don Edwards San Francisco Bay National Wildlife Refuge. I learned my love of conservation here. I grew up about 100 meters from the bay, Shoreline Drive near Crown Memorial Park, if you know Alameda. We actually have a refuge now, formerly the Navy base, but it's critically important habitat for the endangered least tern. So this is the place I grew up and learned to love conservation. And it's amazing too. Until you leave the San Francisco Bay, you don't know what you had. One of the things that I love about this place is the diversity of cultures, races, people of all kinds, creative thinkers, a deep ingrained view of environmental conservation. I didn't know the world wasn't like this until I left. And it gave me a broad and deep respect for this place. We're standing on the shoulders of giants. "50 years ago, if we could turn back the clock and see what the world has become 50 years ago, I think we would have, as a society, done a lot of things different. But for the blessings from above, we had leaders like Florence, like many of you, that had the foresight and wisdom to protect places like this half a century ago. Does anybody know how many wetlands are left in California that are natural? fewer than 5%. Wetlands have systematically been transformed into development, important agricultural activities, but wetlands are so precious in this state. In this region of the Fish and Wildlife Service, we joke sometimes we're the Fish and Wildlife Service of water and fire. Just this week, we proposed listing longfin smelt, which uses San Francisco Bay. Delta smelt, a cousin, also critically endangered. Our salmon are suffering tremendously. Climate change is advancing with rapidity. But for the leadership of Florence and so many others that cared enough about conservation to get things done, this lovely place may have been lost. We're standing on the shoulders of giants. I want to thank the Ohlone, wonderful songs, wonderful way to start this celebration. The Costanoan Rumsum Carmel tribe, this is their ancestral home. The Native American connection to this land is so critically important. And it's something we celebrate across the country now. We have a Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, the first Native American woman ever in the President's cabinet. Oh! Just a wonderful visionary. And her leadership has transformed the way we think about our relationship with Native American tribes. It's a critically important trust responsibility, but her leadership, her person, has made it a centerpiece of all the work that we do across this country. We're deeply grateful. Florence, I'll just mention it again, thank you. 1965 is the date that I heard, preceding this refuge by 7 years. Now Don Edwards has 30,000 acres of lands and waters that are protected. Yes. We've heard about Congressman Edwards. We owe a deep debt of gratitude for his leadership, his tireless commitment to this place. It takes leaders in Congress to do things like this. Without that hard work, without the appropriations that Florence mentioned, it would be really hard for us to do the work that is so valuable to us. As I mentioned, established in 1972, this is one of the most important urban refuges in the country. A lot of our refuges are found in very remote locations. They provide tremendously important habitat for fish and wildlife and plants in their lands and waters across this great country. It's the most important network of lands dedicated for fish and wildlife and plants and their habitats in the world. What's especially important about this place is its connection to the San Francisco Bay. In the end, science doesn't make decisions, people do. And it takes people that care. People like you to be in a position to protect these important places for the benefit of wildlife, but also for our benefit. And having an urban refuge like this, having the connection to the school districts that we do, bringing people in, giving them a chance to see it firsthand and appreciate the value of these important places. What we're doing with you is creating the next generation of conservation leaders, those that will walk in our shoes and carry on the legacy like we're doing with all of Florence's work going forward. We're particularly proud of our urban refuges because of that connection with the community and people. The fundamentally most important need is that having people that care by our side so we can protect these places and pass them on to the next generation. 30,000 acres of lands and waters at Don Edwards. We have 800,000 visitors a year. Just do the division. Unbelievable resource. A huge connection to this community. Many people will experience the outdoors for the first time in this refuge and get the bug for conservation, that lifelong passion that we all have. It's an amazing contribution to our San Francisco Bay community. 40 million people in California alone. We have lots of threatened and endangered species because of these pressures, and they're only getting harder in the face of climate change as water becomes more scarce and fire becomes more frequent. Endangered California clapper rail and that harvest mouse, that marsh harvest mouse that Florence talked about. We're proud to have the ability to protect these species from slipping into extinction. Oftentimes, the recovery road is a long and arduous one, but we have moments of joy. That's what we want. We want longfin to thrive. We want Delta smelt back. We want salmon to succeed. We want clapper rail to recover. It's a dubious distinction in some ways to be on the endangered species list because it means you're in the emergency room. The goal of the Endangered Species Act is to recover species so they don't need that dubious distinction. And it's one we take great pride in. And we know that you do too. That's why you're here. Our agency is the oldest fish and wildlife conservation agency in the country. Started with fisheries and migratory bird needs in the 1800s. We're 9,000 strong across this country, from the Arctic to the Florida Keys, right, Ann? And 9,000 sounds like a lot. We've got a budget of about $1.5 billion a year, but in the big picture, it's small potatoes. You know, we're fighters just like you for conservation, and it takes people and partners to get big things done for conservation. We can't do it alone. We need you, and thank you. I want to thank the staff of the Fish and Wildlife Service. Please raise your hands. Volunteers too. This is our life's work. Working for the Fish and Wildlife Service and in conservation is a labor of love. It is not a job, it is a calling. Apathy is really not our problem, it's the opposite. It's turning it off and being present and not having your mind always turning about getting that conservation achievement done tonight, tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon, building that coalition to make bigger things happen than we can do by ourselves. So thank you, Fish and Wildlife Service staff. I know how hard you work. I know how underfunded you are. Please know I'm your biggest fan, and to our volunteers as well. We'd be nothing without you. I do want to focus on partnerships a little bit more. We're at our best when we work with other people. Oftentimes that means compromise. It means finding common ground. It means trying to magnify the strength that we have with our passion and our resources 100-fold through the commitment and passion and resources of many others. And in this location, Don Edwards in particular, the list of partners that we have is so rich. We thank you deeply. The San Francisco Bay Wildlife Society, we thank you. Citizens Committee to Complete the Refuge, thank you. Hundreds of acres left. You know how much hundreds of acres cost in the San Francisco Bay Area?
Yep, we do know.
We've got some refuges in the middle of Nevada where I think the dollars per acre would be a little different. And the South Bay Salt Pond Restoration Project, one of the most important and ambitious projects that we have in the country. We will get it done. It'll take a long time, working closely with the Corps of Engineers, with leaders like Senator Feinstein and other members of Congress that support us. Silicon Valley, we've seen the explosion of Silicon Valley and the capacity for resources that can help us toward that end. We will persevere. That's a key word that I've heard today that I certainly share. Finally, I just want to say thank you for joining us today. It's a great day in conservation, half a century of Don Edwards. Florence, thank you again. Fish and Wildlife Service team and volunteers, thank you. All of our partners and supporters, thank you for caring. At the end of the day, it takes people to get conservation done, and we're blessed to have so many friends and partners that make it so.
Okay, so we just have a few thoughts as we wrap up today's formal portion of the program. Just a few thoughts. First, I did want to take a moment and just say how proud I am of the San Francisco Bay Complex team, our partners, the regional office team who is here. I speak for all of us when I say it is an honor to work on this refuge, to work on this complex, and to carry on the legacy of conservation and community engagement that started with those who came before us. And a special thanks just goes out to the team who put all of this together, led by Giselle Aguilar, and included Ann Spanar, Rachel Curtis, Miguel Marquez, Paul Muir, Winnie Chan, Adona Kukuros, Madison Klein, Olivia Palouse, Chris Barr, Susan Ewing, Tyrone Asencio, Jackie Domita, and Miguel Portaleo. And I know you should never rattle off a list of names because I guarantee you I forgot somebody. I know I forgot somebody, so I apologize to the people I inadvertently left off the list. And finally, last thing, there is one person that I left off the list intentionally because we all wanted to acknowledge them separately. So much of today is focused on the past and recognizing the work that's taking place today. But I think Florence would agree that all of the work that she did and all of the work that we continue to do with her today, we are doing for future generations. And I don't know anybody who has done more for the next generation of leaders than Tia. And she inspires that next generation of conservation leaders. This year we celebrated the 15th anniversary of a program called the Habitat Heroes. The Habitat Heroes, it's local youth, many of whom were introduced to the refuge and to Tia through her nationally recognized environmental education programs. And then they come back. Many of them are working today to pull off this event. And they do educational efforts, community engagement, truly the stepping stones of engagement. And earlier this year, we received a note from one of the parents of the Habitat Heroes, and I'll just quote a small piece of this really long note. "Through my mom lenses, I can see that this program helped my child grow more gracefully, to acquire new leadership skills, to develop responsibility for the land and the planet, and join an amazing community of like-minded youth that inspired them even further. Kindness was literally oozing in the program, and there is something very contagious about kindness, especially when it is so ample. Our children could feel safe and important and empowered in this positive environment." So as we've got some of the Habitat Heroes on stage today, we're going to join Paul, Florence, and I in just presenting a certificate of appreciation to Tia in recognition of just her outstanding contributions to teaching the future leaders of conservation. Thank you. You can say something.
Well, no. I
No.
can't. I'm verklempt.
She's verklempt.
I'm so verklempt. This was okay. Well, yeah. So this was my dream. Okay, so 72. You could do the math too, but I was a high school student. I'll just say that part. And someone said to me in a biology class, one person can make a difference. And I thought, yeah. Come on, forget it. No way. And I believed that not one person could make a difference till I met Florence. No, this is true, Florence. I can't lie. It's the truth. And she inspired me, and that passion continues down the road with these Habitat Heroes and also with Rhea. I have to point out Rhea right here, this one here, who you may have even seen some of her beautiful artwork and signage. Sharing the message. This was her own project. She was a 5th grader when she started this project. That's the future, guys. That's the future. Right? I do. I can't do it alone. And are we ready for the song? Do I get to do the song now? Because, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, I'm known as the Participation Ranger. Okay, so with me this time, ready? My roots go down, down into the ground. My roots go down, down into the ground. My roots go down, down into the ground. My roots go down, down, down. One more time, loud! Our roots go down, down into the ground. Our roots go down, down into the ground. Our roots go down, down into the ground. Our roots go down. Down, down. Woo! Awesome job, everyone. Thank you so much.